What is the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation about?
Yeah, so really pleased that the federal government declared that September 30th would be a day of recognizing and commemorating residential schools and the intergenerational trauma created by us as colonial people against Indigenous people across Canada or Turtle Island. And it's an opportunity for us to reflect on recognizing and acknowledging the truth of the establishment of the Indian Act, which still exists today, the 60s scoop, residential schools, and other acts of oppression that we have instituted to oppress Indigenous people throughout Canada. And so we commemorate this so that we acknowledge the truth and we find ways to move forward in reconciliation together with Indigenous partners, our sisters and brothers together.
Why is it also called Orange Shirt Day?
Yeah, you Google it and you'll see that there are lots of different stories, but overall, the story that we generally authentically tell is the story of a young Indigenous girl, Phyllis Webstad, who was at a residential school in British Columbia and went to school in an orange shirt and her traditional Indigenous skirt. And when upon arrival, the school officials removed both of those items that she cherished and never returned them to her. And just another sign of how we try to take away the culture and identity of Indigenous people, and a reminder to all of us that that form of bullying is not acceptable and never will be.
How can Catholic leaders support truth and reconciliation?
Yeah, that's a really important question because, you know, for the most part, there were a number of faith religions who ran residential schools. They were hired by the federal government at the time and provided monies to run the residential school, essentially to assimilate the Indigenous people into the colonial ways of living. And so the thinking was to, you know, take the Indigenous people away from their families and teach them traditional colonial ways of living, which were very different from the way that the Indigenous people taught their children on how to live, to respect the land, to live in harmony with the land, and some of those really important traditions that if we were to adopt them today would be making a difference. And so Catholic institutions were part of those religious structures that ran the residential schools. And sadly, there was some corruption that took place within those schools and some atrocities that occurred, and we're learning about them through the reparations that are occurring through Truth and Reconciliation and the 94 calls to action. And so as a Catholic Church, we need to acknowledge that and we need to apologize. And so call to action number 58 calls Pope Francis to come to Canada and apologize to Indigenous people for the establishment of our residential schools. And I think that, you know, that is such an important step for us to realize that call to action number 58. Last week, the Catholic Bishops of Canada came together and collectively apologized to Indigenous people. And that's a big first step for me personally, because I know that right across Canada, bishops were at different places in terms of their own journey on truth and reconciliation and weren't ready to offer an apology. So last week was monumental when they came forward and announced that they made a public apology to the harms that were perpetuated against Indigenous people in Canada.
How does the York Catholic District School Board support truth and reconciliation?
Yeah, it's been a short time that I've been here. And since I left 5 years ago, a lot has happened in the commitment that York Catholic District School Board staff and students and their families have put towards understanding and moving forward in truth and reconciliation. And some of the gestures and pieces that we've put in place that will make a change and make a difference over time is first of all, I think it's powerful that we've instituted the Aboriginal Studies course in grade 11 right across all our high schools. I think that's a massive first step in helping our young people to understand our history and our history of our Indigenous people, and then to look at ways that we can move forward in reconciliation. Commemorating Orange Shirt Day and the level of curriculum that's being developed to support our schools in teaching about Orange Shirt Day is another significant step in making this an important event for us in our school board. And then, and this is the part I love, is that individually schools have taken what they've learned and then have created their own little way of moving forward in truth and reconciliation. And I think that is so powerful and adds so much more to the element of truth and reconciliation.
What are some good ways schools can mark Orange Shirt Day?
So I think without being exclusive and allowing the principal latitude to be creative, I think making sure that everybody has access to an orange shirt, and through that solidarity we talk about why are we wearing this orange shirt on September 30th. And then to further that conversation, September 30th is one day out of 365, and really from our point of view, we need to make sure that it's not just one day, that we're investing time and understanding how we can make life better for Indigenous people in Canada and how we can walk together with them. So I think investing that time.
Conversations about truth and reconciliation can be difficult. What supports are in place for those who are struggling with these topics?
Yeah, and that's very true, because I think we're all cognizant of making sure that we don't say the wrong thing, and that we're sensitive to some of the microaggressions that we might share in our conversations, and not that they're intended to be microaggressions, but it's all about understanding what is a microaggression, learning about it, and then making sure we avoid it. Yeah, and so we have a strong leadership team here centrally through Anthony Arcady, Lou Pawaneza, Shannon Ulgiati, and we are strongly connected to knowledge keepers and elders within the community who are willing, ready, and able to share their own knowledge and assist us when we get into those difficult conversations. One of the things I can advise us is not to be afraid to enter in those conversations. I think it's important that we do. And, the journey will include, making mistakes and learning from those mistakes and not repeating it. That's how we become better and move forward in truth and reconciliation.
What can we do to support truth and reconciliation?
I think that we can make sure that we are learning about Indigenous people in Canada, their history, and making sure that we do that through reading literature, through reading newspapers on events that are happening daily. I don't think a day goes by where there isn't a story that perpetuates and reinforces the need for us to do this work. I remember, again, relating back to my experience in Saskatchewan, there were the first month I was there was a farmer by the name of Gerald Stanley who had a group of 4 Indigenous youth drive onto his property, and they had a flat tire and were looking for help, and he thought they were trying to steal from his farm, so he went out, took his gun, and shot one of the the young Indigenous persons, a 22-year-old by the name of Colton Boushie, and killed him. And those kinds of pieces help us to understand that this work is imminent. It's still present today. It's something that we need to keep on the front burner and make ourselves knowledgeable, and then look how we can repair those relationships so we are walking hand in hand in reconciliation.